Hey guys, me again. There's something very, very important that I want to talk about with regards to these so-called supercars and so-called sports cars. I think they're all sports cars. It's the marketing teams and other media people that want to come up with different names just to make the cars sound more important. It started off with sports cars, then supercars, now hypercars. I don't know what's coming next, flying cars. It's just, they're all sports cars. They're for fun. Anyhow, I discovered something not so long ago that is really bugging me, and it's also something that I think everyone should know about. So I met this guy who was doing very well in his business, and he had a white van, and as we were talking, he said, "This is my office." And I was like, "What do you mean you have an office in your van?" And he said, "Yeah." And he opened the door, and I was so surprised. It had all these computers and gadgets and so much stuff inside. And I met him through the car scene, and it was so shocking for me to find out what his business was. Basically, he adjusts the mileage on cars, and he said he's not the only one. There are hundreds of people like him, and their businesses are flourishing because our lovely car dealers are so corrupt in England, or United Kingdom I should say. So there are a few things that are shocking about this story. The first one is that person gets cash in hand for all the work he does. So everything is off the books, which means low taxes or no taxes. So that's one thing. Second thing is that it's not illegal to clock the cars or readjust the mileage on the cars, as they call it, mileage correction. Why on earth would you need mileage correction on a car? What could go wrong that you need to correct it? It's the biggest bullshit lie. Anyway, as I carry on in my story, he told me, and because it was like a friendly, he was there with his friends and had a bit to drink, so he was telling me all the stuff openly and honestly. But basically, he said that obviously his business is flourishing, he makes a lot of money, which means that he gets a lot of business. And I thought in my head that it's private individuals who buy cars, then put a lot of miles on it, and then go to people like him, and he then changes the mileage back. So in my head I was thinking, gosh, I should be very careful if I buy a car privately, only to find out that his private customers are only 10% of his business. 90% are dealers, and I'm not talking independent dealers only. He said main dealers for all the big brands come to him with cars, and some cars are nearly new. They only turn the clock back by 4,000 or 5,000. Other times it's a new car, someone has had it for a year, but they've been driving it around all over Europe or wherever, and they've put several thousand miles. And as they call these cars mileage sensitive, that's again a bullshit created by car salesmen. They want people to pay a lot of money for low mileage cars and make everyone believe that the cars have not been used. But in reality, these cars have been extensively used, just that their mileage has been reversed. Now that's very sad that we in the first world, in one of these advanced, educated, civilized countries, there's so much corruption and people are being conned by so-called main dealers. And he was telling me that in some cases, cars come from Germany and other countries, and they are brand new. The dealers or their friends, they put trade plates on them, they drive them around, have fun, and then they prepare them, have the mileage changed back to, I don't know, 15, 20 miles to make it look like it's not been used, and then sell it on to or give it to the customer who ordered it. So I mean, it's shocking. I mean, my car has done, what, 13,000 miles now? Yeah, it looks as good as new, but it's been used. And I have to say, all these YouTubers, I watch their videos and they talk about how many miles they put on their cars, and that's what happens. Between 3 of my cars annually, I do about 15,000 miles easily. So there's no harm in putting miles on the car and driving it. That's what they're there for. Actually, if a car's not been driven, the oil hasn't circulated enough, the mechanics haven't worked, so there's chances of rust and other issues. You should be more worried about cars that are not driven. I'm sure I will be hated by all the dealers who are watching this, because I'm sure there's a small percentage of people who are honest and they don't do this, but from the stories that I heard from these guys, it seems like the vast majority do this. And he said if they don't, they won't sell their cars and they won't be able to compete with those that are clocking cars, because the whole thing in this car scene has been created in a way that no mileage cars are more desirable. The other thing that I looked up after these discussions, what I did was I did some research on both sports cars, supercars between Europe and UK, and then I looked up the same on ordinary cars, Europe and UK. And funnily enough, all the second-hand cars around Europe have more mileage on them, and they're still more expensive than the ones in the UK. So in the UK the mileage is lower, which shows that someone is fiddling with the mileage, because UK isn't one of those countries where people don't drive or it's very small. People do drive, but I don't know, it was such a shocking thing for me. And now I'm going to be really, really, really careful if I ever buy a second-hand car, because the guy was telling me that you should never trust the mileage on any car. Doesn't matter what service history shows you, what the MOT certificate shows you. You should always check the car itself and check the quality, the condition, the telltale signs of how old it is, rather than trusting what the mileage is. So a long time ago I heard that Porsche had put some stuff that prevents people from adjusting the mileage and all that. So when I mentioned it to the guy, he said, oh yeah, no big deal. With Porsche it is not as straightforward as so many other cars. So you have to remove the speedometer and the whole unit itself and then plug it in and do it. In other cars you can just connect it up to the main ECU connector or whatever, the service thing. But it was an eye-opener. I knew that it happened with some old second-hand cars, especially the old ones where they could open and change the mechanism and do that, but digital meters apparently are very easy as well. Then I was doing some research online after hearing all this story, and I thought I should look up and see what goes on really, and how it's done and what people have to say about. And then there was this article on this forum where people were discussing that Porsche, when they plug it into their system, they can check through the number of hours driven and the number of miles covered through the gearbox and other things. Then they can look at the odometer and they know that, well, the car should have done this many miles and it's less. But again, if you're living in London and you're stuck in traffic all the time, then you may have done more hours, but you haven't covered enough distance, so I don't know how that would prove anything. Anyway, I thought I should let you know. So do let me know in the comments what you think and how this could be fixed. I think it can only be fixed by people not getting fixated with low mileage cars and start looking at the quality, condition, previous owners, all that, rather than just looking at a low mileage car.